Chapter 2: The Rise of Giant Maximin by Arthur Conan Doyle. Exactly 25 years had passed since the day that Thecla, the huge Thracian peasant, had turned into Maximin, the Roman guardsman. They had not been good years for Rome. Gone forever were the great imperial days of the Hadrians and the Trajans. Gone also the golden age of the two Antonines, when the highest were for once the most worthy and most wise. It had been an epoch of weak and cruel men. Severus, the swarthy African, a stark, grim man, had died in faraway York, after fighting all the winter with the Caledonian Highlanders, a race who have ever since worn the martial garb of the Romans. His son, known only by his slighting nickname of Caracalla, had reigned during 6 years of insane lust and cruelty, before the knife of an angry soldier avenged the dignity of the Roman name. The nonentity Macrinus had filled the dangerous throne for a single year before he also met a bloody end, and made room for the most grotesque of all monarchs, the unspeakable Heliogabalus with his foul mind and his painted face. He in turn was cut to pieces by the soldiers, and Severus Alexander, a gentle youth, scarce 17 years of age, had been thrust into his place. For 13 years now he had ruled, striving with some success to put some virtue and stability into the rotting empire, but raising many fierce enemies as he did so, enemies whom he had not the strength nor the wit to hold in check. And giant Maximin, what of him? He had carried his 8 feet of manhood through the lowlands of Scotland and the passes of the Grampians. He had seen Severus pass away, and had soldiered with his son. He had fought in Armenia, in Dacia, and in Germany. They had made him a centurion upon the field when with his hands he plucked out one by one the stockades of a northern village, and so cleared a path for the stormers. His strength had been the jest and the admiration of the soldiers. Legends about him had spread through the army, and were the common gossip round the camp fires, of his duel with the German axeman on the island of the Rhine, and of the blow with his fist which broke the leg of a Scythian's horse. Gradually he had won his way upwards, until now, after quarter of a century's service, he was tribune of the 4th Legion and superintendent of recruits for the whole army. The young soldier who had come under the glare of Maximin's eyes, or had been lifted up with one huge hand while he was cuffed by the other, had his first lesson from him in the discipline of the service. It was nightfall in the camp of the 4th Legion upon the Gallic shore of the Rhine. Across the moonlit water, amid the thick forests which stretched away to the dim horizon, lay the wild, untamed German tribes. Down on the river bank, the light gleamed upon the helmets of the Roman sentinels who kept guard along the river. Far away a red point rose and fell in the darkness, a watchfire of the enemy upon the further shore. Outside his tent, beside some smoldering logs, giant Maximin was seated, a dozen of his officers around him. He had changed much since the day when we first met him in the valley of the Harpessus. His huge frame was as erect as ever, and there was no sign of diminution of his strength, but he had aged none the less. The yellow tangle of hair was gone, worn down by the ever-pressing helmet. The fresh young face was drawn and hardened, with austere lines wrought by trouble and privation. The nose was more hawk-like, the eyes more cunning, the expression more cynical and more sinister. In his youth, a child would have run to his arms. Now it would shrink screaming from his gaze. That was what 25 years with the eagles had done for Thecla the Thracian peasant. He was listening now, for he was a man of few words, to the chatter of his centurions. One of them, Balbus the Sicilian, had been to the main camp at Mainz, only 4 miles away, and had seen the Emperor Alexander arrive that very day from Rome. The rest were eager at the news, for it was a time of unrest, and the rumor of great changes was in the air. How many had he with him? Asked Labienus, a black-browed veteran from the south of Gaul. I'll wager a month's pay that he was not so trustful as to come alone among his faithful legions. He had no great force, replied Balbus, 10 or 12 cohorts of the Praetorians and a handful of horse. Then indeed his head is in the lion's mouth, cried Sulpicius, a hot-headed youth from the African Pentapolis. How was he received? Coldly enough, there was scarce a shout as he came down the line. They are ripe for mischief, said Labienus. And who can wonder, when it is we soldiers who uphold the empire upon our spears, while the lazy citizens at Rome reap all of our sowing? Why cannot a soldier have what a soldier gains? So long as they throw us our denarius a day, they think that they have done with us. I, croaked a grumbling old graybeard. Our limbs, our blood, our lives, what do they care so long as the barbarians are held off, and they are left in peace to their feastings and their circus? Free bread, free wine, free games, everything for the loafer at Rome, for us the frontier guard and a soldier's fare. Maximin gave a deep laugh. Old Plancus talks like that, said he, but we know that for all the world he would not change his steel plate for a citizen's gown. You've earned the kennel, old hound, if you wish it. Go and gnaw your bone and growl in peace. Nay, I am too old for change. I will follow the eagle till I die. And yet I had rather die in serving a soldier master than a long-gowned Syrian who comes of a stock where the women are men and the men are women. There was a laugh from the circle of soldiers, for sedition and mutiny were rife in the camp, and even the old centurion's outbreak could not draw a protest. Maximin raised his great mastiff head and looked at Balbus. Was any name in the mouths of the soldiers? He asked in a meaning voice. There was a hush for the answer. The sigh of the wind among the pines and the low lapping of the river swelled out louder in the silence. Balbus looked hard at his commander. Two names were whispered from rank to rank, said he. One was Asinius Pollio, the general, the other was. The fiery Sulpicius sprang to his feet, waving a glowing brand above his head. Maximinus, he yelled, Imperator Maximinus Augustus. Who could tell how it came about? No one had thought of it an hour before. And now it sprang in an instant to full accomplishment. The shout of the frenzied young African had scarcely rung through the darkness when from the tents, from the watchfires, from the sentries, the answer came pealing back. Ave Maximinus, Ave Maximinus Augustus. From all sides men came rushing, half-clad, wild-eyed, their eyes staring, their mouths agape, flaming wisps of straw or flaring torches above their heads. The giant was caught up by scores of hands and sat enthroned upon the bull necks of the legionaries. To the camp, they yelled. To the camp. Hail, hail to the soldier Caesar. That same night Severus Alexander, the young Syrian emperor, walked outside his Praetorian camp, accompanied by his friend Licinius Probus, the captain of the guard. They were talking gravely of the gloomy faces and seditious bearing of the soldiers. A great foreboding of evil weighed heavily upon the emperor's heart, and it was reflected upon the stern bearded face of his companion. I like it not, said he. It is my counsel, Caesar, that with the first light of morning we make our way south once more. But surely, the emperor answered, I could not for shame turn my back upon the danger. What have they against me? How have I harmed them that they should forget their vows and rise upon me? They are like children who ask always for something new. You heard the murmur as you rode along the ranks. Nay, Caesar, fly tomorrow, and your Praetorians will see that you are not pursued. There may be some loyal cohorts among the legions, and if we join forces. A distant shout broke in upon their conversation. A low, continued roar, like the swelling tumult of a sweeping wave. Far down the road upon which they stood there twinkled many moving lights, tossing and sinking as they rapidly advanced, whilst the hoarse tumultuous bellowing broke into articulate words, the same tremendous words, a thousandfold repeated. Licinius seized the emperor by the wrist and dragged him under the cover of some bushes. Be still, Caesar, for your life be still, he whispered. One word and we are lost. Crouching in the darkness, they saw that wild procession pass, the rushing, screaming figures, the tossing arms, the bearded, distorted faces, now scarlet and now gray, as the brandished torches waxed or waned. They heard the rush of many feet, the clamor of hoarse voices, the clang of metal upon metal. And then suddenly, above them all, they saw a vision of a monstrous man, a huge bowed back, a savage face, grim hawk eyes that looked out over the swaying shields. It was seen for an instant in a smoke-fringed circle of fire, and then it had swept on into the night. Who is he? Stammered the emperor, clutching at his guardsman's sleeve. They call him Caesar. It is surely Maximin, the Thracian peasant. In the darkness, the Praetorian officer looked with strange eyes at his master. It is all over, Caesar, let us fly your tent. But even as they went, a second shout had broken forth tenfold louder than the first. If the one had been the roar of the oncoming wave, the other was the full turmoil of the tempest. 20,000 voices from the camp had broken into one wild shout which echoed through the night, until the distant Germans round their watchfires listened in wonder and alarm. Ave, cried the voices, Ave Maximinus Augustus. High upon their bucklers stood the giant, and looked round him at the great floor of upturned faces below. His own savage soul was stirred by the clamor, but only his gleaming eyes spoke of the fire within. He waved his hand to the shouting soldiers as the huntsman waves to the leaping pack. They passed him up a coronet of oak leaves and clashed their swords in homage as he placed it on his head. And then there came a swirl in the crowd before him, a little space was cleared, and there knelt an officer in the Praetorian garb, blood upon his face, blood upon his bared forearm, blood upon his naked sword. Licinius too had gone with the tide. "Hail, Caesar, hail!" he cried as he bowed his head before the giant. "I come from Alexander, he will trouble you no more."